favourite, Catelyn would often say irrepressibly to Zosina, because you were his first disappointment. Helsa was number 2, and Theone number 3. By the time he reached me, he disliked me so much I am only surprised he did not cut me up into small pieces and scatter me from the battlements. Catelyn had a dramatic imagination, and perhaps because she lacked the affection of her father and her mother, was always thinking herself wildly in love with one of the younger officials in the palace, or, more understandably, the officers of the guard. Zosina was in many ways very different from her sisters. They had a practical and sensible outlook on life which made them accept family difficulties and the small but tiresome privations to which they were subject as an inevitable quirk of fate. "If I had the choice, I would rather have been born the daughter of a forester," Theone said once, "than a royal princess without any of the glamour or excitement that should go with it." "You will get that when you are grown up," Zosina answered. Theone had laughed. "What about you? You were allowed to go to your coming-out ball, but you had to dance with all the oldest and more boring officials in the country. Since then, Mamma has made no effort to entertain for you, unless you call it being entertained when you are allowed to sit in the drawing-room when she receives the councillors' wives and they talk about their charities or something equally deadly." Zosina had to admit that these were not particularly exciting occasions. At the same time, she had learned long ago not to be bored with having to listen to the stiff, desultory conversation which was all that the palace etiquette permitted. "The weather has been cold lately," her mother would say, starting the conversation as protocol directed. "It has indeed, Your Royal Highness. I often say to the Archduke that the winds at this time of the year are very treacherous. They are indeed, Your Royal Highness. We will all be thankful when the warm weather comes. It is something we all look forward to, Your Royal Highness." Zosina was not listening. Her thoughts had carried her far away into a fantasy world where people talked intelligently and wittily. Or else she was on Mount Olympus, mixing with gods and goddesses of ancient Greece and pondering on the problems to which mankind had tried through all eternity to find a solution. The Archduchess would have been astounded if she had known how knowledgeable her oldest daughter was on the behaviour, a great deal of it outrageous, of the Greek gods. She would have been equally astonished if she had known that Zosina pored over books written by French authors that gave an insight into the strange diversions that had invaded French literature during the Second Empire. Zosina was fortunate in that the palace library, which had been started by her great-grandfather, was considered one of the treasures of Lützelstein. It therefore behoved the present ruler, Archduke Ferdinand, to keep it up, for which, fortunately, an endowment from Parliament was provided every year. New books were purchased and added to the thousands already accumulated, and the librarian, an elderly man, was easily persuaded by Princess Zosina to put on his list of requirements those books she particularly wanted to read. "I am not sure that Her Royal Highness would approve," he would say occasionally when Zosina had pleaded for some author whose somewhat doubtful reputation had reached even Lützelstein. "You are quite safe, mein Herr," Zosina would say. "Mamma never has time to read, and so she is unlikely to criticise anything you have on your shelves." She smiled as she spoke, and the librarian had found himself smiling back and agreeing to anything this extremely pretty girl demanded of him. Zosina now reached the hall and hurried to the door that led into her father's study. It was an extremely impressive room, the walls covered with dark panelling, the windows draped with heavily fringed velvet curtains, the furniture ponderous and old-fashioned. It was a room that all 4 princesses disliked intensely, because it was always here that their father lectured them on their misdeeds, and where they waited apprehensively for the moment when he would fly into one of his rages, that usually ended in his storming at them, "Get out of my sight! I have seen enough of all 4 of you! God knows why I should be inflicted with such stupid, fractious females instead of being blessed with an intelligent son." It was the signal for them to leave, but even though they found the relief of doing so almost inexpressible, their hearts would be thumping and their lips dry. In some way they could not explain even to each other, they did not feel safe until they were back in the schoolroom. "What can I have done to upset Papa?" Zosina asked herself now. Then, with an instinctive little lift of her chin, she opened the door and went in. Her father was sitting, as she expected, in his favourite high-back winged armchair near the hearth. There was no fire because it was summer, and it was typical, Zosina often thought, that in this room there was no arrangement of flowers.